Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. Michael Zuber, one rental at a time, back with the one and only Mr. Greg Dickerson. How you doing, sir?
Doing great, Michael. Good to see you.
Nice to see you as well. I will let you know that my audience dearly missed you. I know I had two Mondays that I missed because of family travel. But yes, the audience missed you, and I got several comments. So thank you for coming back.
Awesome. Yeah, yeah. Well, I missed our discussions. It's always a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, let's start with um, a hot topic, right? There's a lot of talk about, hey, are we in a recession? Are we going to go into a recession? When I look at the worldwide economy, let alone the U.S. economy, I think we're going to go into a recession. I actually think it will be a housing-led recession, as many recessions are. But I also think this recession coming up is going to be a little different than maybe the traditional recession. So I guess I'll first start with, do you think we either are in or will have a recession in the next 12 months? Or do you think really the Fed could pull off a soft landing and no recession will happen? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're, in a real one right now, maybe technically or whatever, but yeah, the economy's still strong. People are still spending. The jobs market is still really strong. The housing market is still really strong. Very stubborn, and rates are coming down a little bit now with what's going on with the bond market lately. So, it's really interesting. I did a video last week and I talked a little bit about that we are consumption based economy. The consumers are spending. They're not backing off. People are not backing off. The jobs that are being lost right now are just high tech jobs, from companies that were overstuffed anyways. To make their growth look good. Hey, we're hiring people, so we're
Yeah.
growing when money was free and trying to attract capital. So they're just their payrolls were bloated anyways.
Mhm.
So, you know, until you start to see the housing market really, really contract, and we're going to start to see some construction layoffs more at scale going into next year, but builders are still building, they're finishing houses. There's a lot of commercial construction still underway and going on. It's going to be a while. I don't think it's going to be something we're going to see right away. But, like I've said, Q1 will tell us a lot. Q2, if we're going to have an event, it's probably going to happen around that time, Q3, somewhere around there. But it takes a while to come off of where we've been when people's savings have been so strong. People getting laid off have severance. At the higher levels that we're seeing right now, they've got 6 months to a year's worth of income that they're getting laid off with. They're
Yeah.
working 2 or 3 jobs anyways. In that tech sector, like they have a full-time job paying them 300 grand a year, then they've got these side gigs
Yeah.
going on. So,
Hmm.
I think it's going to be more sticky and more stubborn than everybody expects with the inflation. I don't see that coming down anytime soon, significantly. Real inflation that we're all seeing. So it's an interesting time. My question is, can we live with higher inflation? Is it just going to be 4 or 5%? I don't know that we can get to two anytime quickly, because the Fed, I mean, they're already backing down their rate hikes, and what they've done so far hasn't really put a dent in the economy.
I think, again, I'm a study of economic history, and I do think we'll be in a recession that is called sometime next year, probably Q2, Q3, maybe Q1. I think it will be housing led, but I think it'll be very much like a 1969 and 1970 recession, which was 11 months in duration and had a negative GDP total of like 1.4%. So that would be your classic shallow recession. I think that's where we are. To your point, I think what we're going to experience in the next 12 months is kind of not your traditional economic contraction. I think there's a couple of things that will make this one different. And I think you pointed at one of them, but I think this even becomes more obvious in Q1. I think a lot of the pain we feel in the job market will be white collar led. It'll be tech led, finance led. I don't, Goldman Sachs just warned that their bonuses are going to be at least 10% smaller this year. So I think there's a lot of pain coming to the white collar sector. And I don't think it'll be blue collar. I think we are still grossly underemployed. I think there's lots of job openings. So that's something that I think is going to be a little different, next year. Is a lot of the layoffs will be in the tech sector. And to your point, they usually come with severance. They come with healthcare or Cobra for a little while. So there will be kind of delay on that. What do you think there?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, and I think Powell, that's what he's saying. He seems to think it's going to be a softish landing, and the economy is just so strong and so robust. The big thing is inflation. What is that going to do? And it's kind of hard to get negative GDP when you have inflation like it is, because that's contributing to top line growth.
Nominal versus real. People don't often understand it. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah. Easiest way to get growth is increase top line sales.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly. So it's funny. The other thing I've come to appreciate is this talk of inflation. I think most talking heads oversimplify it. And I actually think there are three tier or strata or whatever you want to call it to inflation. So let me see how you react to this. The top tier is easy. And what I call that is stuff, right? Stuff is becoming cheaper. We're seeing deflation. We're seeing commodities come down. We're seeing gas come down. We're seeing shipping come down, right? So there's a stuff component. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending how you look at it, stuff is only about 32% of our GDP. So I think there's 2%, maybe 2.5% of the original 9.1 that'll be easy to fall off. And I think that's off by the end of Q1 next year. Then we get to call it 6%. I think that is hard. The next tier or third is hard. That is housing. We all have heard now housing is, the numbers they look at are delayed. Rent and prices are being very stubborn. I think it's hard to roll. So that's like 9 or 12 months.
And by the way, I don't know if it's just my feed, but all the housing crash bros have kind of disappeared. I'm not seeing
where'd
their
they
videos.
Go? Yeah. I'll get to that in a minute. And then there's the third tier. This is where I think you were. And I think you're so right again. There's this really, 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 really hard part of inflation that I think is structural in nature. And I think it will be with us for years. Some people are calling a decade because they're saying, hey, anytime CPI got over 5%, it takes a decade to get to 2. I don't think it's a decade, but I think it's 5 years to go from 4 to 2. And that is deglobalization. That is labor. I think we have wageflation spiral that has just begun. I think the employee is going to get theirs. I think unions are going to get theirs. I think we're going to make more stuff here versus China. I think that's structural. I think that's net positive for the U.S. economy overall. But I think, to your point, I think inflation stays anchored at around 4% until at least 2025. So what do you think about that inflation tier?
Yeah. And to your point about commodities and things like that, I mean, that, like you said, that's not going to affect the labor market. The housing market is strong. That's the biggest effect of the labor market. Now we're seeing sales down. So your white collar areas of the housing market are definitely affected. Realtors, mortgage brokers, attorneys, transaction coordinator, all that kind of stuff that goes around the transactions are definitely affected and are having to do other things. But as far as construction goes in the housing market in and of itself, it's going to take a while for that to change. I mean, it's just such a unique thing that we've seen. I don't think you can look at any time in history and compare this. I mean, people want to look at the 20s. They want to look at the 40s. They want to look at the 70s. Yeah. I don't think you can compare anything. We've never had a labor market like this ever. Mm-hmm. We've never had interest rates where they were ever. Mm-hmm. We've never had a spike in inflation and a spike in interest rates up and down both ways ever, like we've seen. Mm-hmm. And we've never had an economy as robust as it is while all this is happening. So the real question is, are we ever going, is 2% even a realistic number? And I think, to your point, we might land at 5 for a number of years to where, the rate of inflation kind of catches up to wages and it kind of balances out. So it reduces itself without having to do anything, because the Fed has shown, number one, they're incompetent. They've got zero credibility. They've lost control. They're not doing what it takes. I mean, Fed, Chair Powell's comment last week, I mean, it's like, what? They haven't done anything yet. We still have inflation that's hurting, the real workers, the real middle income workers. Inflation's killing them. And he's going, yeah, we're going to slow down the pace of rate hikes. And, we think this is working itself out. I mean, it's just ridiculous. They're still in denial of what inflation is really doing and the fact that they're going to be able to get to their 2% target. Maybe, it just doesn't, to me, looking at labor, looking at the spending that's going on, looking at, the resiliency of the consumer out there and globalization. I mean, we're linked globally and there's going to be slowdowns in the global economy in different areas, but largely due to inflation. But, it's a tricky time.
Yeah, and then go back to housing. I don't know if you saw this. We got two housing price numbers. I think it was last Thursday, might have been last Wednesday. One was Case Shiller, one was FHFA. It was funny. Case Shiller came out and basically said, I think we're down 2.3% from the peak, and we're down like 0.8% month on month, negative numbers. And then FHFA or FHA, depending on how you want to reference the organization, um, actually said we were up month on month, right? We were up 0.1%. And again, this is median home price. These are national numbers. Housing prices being a lot more stubborn, as we both called. Transactions down 30 some odd percent. We both called that was happening. But yeah, price is interesting. And now I don't know if you've seen it, but mortgage rates are under 6. They were just 7.5. And I think 6% is a very interesting number. I think going sub 6 actually begets some transactions. What do you think?
Yeah, well, what's interesting is you can get a better rate for jumbo. I just saw something that was sent out earlier today where you can get low fives um,
Wow.
for jumbo loans. And I mean, historically, that's a fantastic rate. It's
Yeah.
really funny. Everybody's this is the biggest problem. This is the biggest problem with inflation and the biggest problem with getting any kind of correction. People's view of these things are distorted, hyper
Yeah.
distorted because of the last almost 3 years now,
Yeah.
because rates were so cheap, money was so available, and everything just blew up. So, like, people they just don't understand. Not everybody, but a lot of people that weren't in the markets or whatever don't really understand. 5% is a great rate. The
Yeah.
twos and the threes that we saw never happened and probably
If you missed
never
it, you
will.
missed it. You blinked.
Right.
Yeah.
It probably never will, but the
Yeah.
values. So that's the other thing. Okay. So prices come down 10%, 13%, 20%. So what? They went up 40% in 2 years. I
Yeah.
mean, they still haven't gotten back to where they were before the pandemic, which were inflated levels because of artificially low interest rates and mortgage backed security purchases by the Fed, still happening while housing was getting way out of control. I mean, they've destroyed so much. It's just amazing that what the Fed's done, the damage they've done. Same
Yeah.
thing as Greenspan back in 08, 09. It was single-handedly Greenspan that destroyed housing and the economy back then, doing the same thing.
Yeah. The Fed broke housing. And again, when I say that, people think I'm referring to today. The Fed
Hmm,
broke housing 3 years ago. That's when they broke housing. When the
it's
Fed not
crazy.
only lowered rates, but they were like, I think I read somewhere they were 52%. They were buying 52% of all mortgage-backed securities at one point during the pandemic. That's distorting. No wonder we had rates at 2. They don't have to make a profit. So
Yeah.
it was
Yeah. It's
wild.
everything's just been so distorted over the last few years that the perception of reality and a lot of the consumers, they don't know. Most people just don't even know.
Yeah.
And housing prices, even though rates are coming down, yeah, that hasn't boosted transactions because this time of year, it's always slow
Yeah.
this time of year.
Yep.
Inventory is always, dips this time of year, transactions slow down. So rates are dipping now, but that's not going to get a lot of people off the sidelines like it normally would. Cause like you said, 6% still isn't interesting when it was at 3 or 2.
Mhm.
And people that
Yeah.
are locked in, they've got nowhere to go. There's no inventory. The prices are still, overinflated compared to where they could be or should be based on rates. But I mean, there's still transactions getting done. I see stuff that still sells at prices, quickly that I'm just like, gosh, this just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and there are people out there like myself that are buying right out of the MLS. Tomorrow I close on my
Mhm.
second deal. I wrote I've written lots of offers, but I've written two disrespectful offers. Both were accepted. I closed one 5 weeks ago and I close another one tomorrow. Real simple story. They were listed at like 260 or 259 or whatever, and I got them for 175 and 180. They had to sell whatever reason. And yeah, so there are people out there who've been stacking cash and are jumping in and buying great deals today. So it can
Yeah, it's
happen.
funny you use that word disrespectful offer. I've seen that twice now in the last week. And to me, that doesn't make any sense. There is no disrespectful
Yeah.
offer. An offer is an offer. Whatever.
Yeah,
It's a
no,
piece of
it's
real
very true.
estate. It's whatever it is. It's a car, it's a piece of real estate, it's
You're
land.
right.
An offer is an offer. There's no level of respect or disrespect. It's just what you're willing to pay. And that's what the market value is, what somebody's willing to pay. And your offer is an offer. And that's the problem with real estate. And business in general, a lot of times is that, people get emotional about it and look at it that way. And it says, hey, if the offer works for you, great. If it doesn't,
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And just so you know where it came from, Patrick Bet David, I've given him credit 100 times now. He said that, I think it was 3 weeks ago in a video. Basically, he was talking about his Ferrari and all this high end stuff, right? Stuff's going on sale. If you want one, go get one. And I'm like, that's what I'm doing in real estate. And you're absolutely right. An accepted offer, it doesn't matter, right? People anchor on price, and I don't, right? I write the number
yeah.
that makes sense for my deal, and if it doesn't make sense to the seller, I move on to the next one. Buyers have the power today, not sellers, and I'm going to use it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, an offer is an offer. I mean, it's just, it just does. But yeah, I think the top of the list right now are G Wagons that are on
Yes,
sale
exactly.
for super big discounts. Lambos and Ferraris are next. And,
It's going to
all
get
of the
worse.
Rolex watches, I think you can get them for 50 cents on the dollar now or something. I don't know, but
Yeah,
that's
it's
what
crazy.
happens. Same thing happened in
Yeah.
08 and 9. People started selling all that stuff first and, to grab cash. And then, real estate was right behind it. It was high end real estate. People stopped eating out at high end restaurants and traded down, and all the high end restaurants were closing, in most markets. And
That's exactly
that's the
how
thing we
this.
haven't seen. See, that's the thing we
Yes,
haven't seen. We're seeing a little
that's
bit of that
coming.
and a little bit of softening. And, when I eat out a lot and I notice,
Oh, you
the
too? Yeah.
restaurants aren't as busy as they used to be, but,
Mm-hmm.
um, I don't think we're going to see the real effects of what's going on. And see, a lot of people still don't think inflation is permanent. I think a lot of people
Yeah.
still think it's going to come down.
Transitory.
Yeah, and gas has come down a little bit, but it's
Yeah.
still at record high levels. And somebody who was at Peter Schiff said over the
Yeah.
weekend that he thinks gas will hit $10, before it's all done in some
Man.
states, California,
Yeah.
which you're not too far off of that now, but
Yeah, it's pretty good. I guess the last thing, kind of how we open it up, is I think this in recession would be very different. I think it will be felt, and I think it was a lot about the last 2 years. There's a lot more people that blended into the luxury market: Rolexes, Lambos, G wagons, high end restaurants, private jets, private planes, flying private. People were pulled up because money was free, and you could fall out of bed and make a profit. You could flip coin, crypto or housing or whatever it is. Everybody was winning, and they were flexing. Now we're going to see people kind of shrink back and sell Rolexes. That's where the pain's going to be, I think, next year, is the luxury
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, you kind of wake up January 1st and you're like, dang, man, I thought I was smart.
Yeah, I
What
thought I had
happened?
a lot of money. Smack.
Well, and it's kind of like a tsunami, right? The tide
Yeah.
kind of goes out, slowly. It's like you're like, what's going on? Why are,
Yeah.
what's happening? And then you start to see who's swimming naked, right? It's like, okay,
Exactly. Yeah.
stuff starts, little cracks here and there. And then all of a sudden this huge
Yes.
wall comes in that you didn't see coming. Even though you saw the tide going out, you
Yeah.
still didn't see this huge
You
thing
didn't
coming.
know what was next. Let me
And then it
tell you.
just hits, and it's so much bigger and it goes so much further and so much deeper and covers so much more ground than you ever thought possible.
Yeah.
And, that's kind of what a recession is like. And I'll equate that back to 2008 and 9. There was very, very few people that knew what would happen and how and the consequences.
Yeah, I knew it was going to be bad. I exited all my singles, but I had I mean, my market fell 75%. I had no idea. I was buying the whole way down.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Well,
So
and right
yeah.
now there's still a lot of irrational exuberance out there. I mean, there's still people right now calling for $250,000 Bitcoin next year.
I
There's
saw
people
that.
calling for new all-time highs in the stock market
I
this
saw
year.
that today.
The
Yeah, I
Santa
saw
Claus
that too.
melt up that's coming this year. So,
Crazy.
when you still have that kind of optimism and that kind of irrational exuberance out there, that means you're still nowhere near where things can go. I'm not saying they will. I'm not saying they have to. I'm just saying we're still kind of treading on thin ice here where, one or two little cracks, the whole thing shatters, and
I agree.
so you just got to be careful and you just got to manage your risk. But that's where your opportunities come from. Once that ice breaks, that's when you get your opportunities.
I love it. Greg, where can people find you?
Yeah, gregdickerson.com.
Thank you, buddy.